What's up guys, it's me TheTacticalBrit and I'm here with my brand new series today called Next Up. Now, this is a discussion series that I've decided to bring to the channel that talks about everything in gaming really, and this is something I've kind of wanted to do because you can only really talk about Battlefield for so long before things get kind of dried up and you know, it's gonna be a case that I kind of wanted to diversify, and I think you guys are really great on this channel at discussing different things. So today I figured I'd start off with a basic one, and arguably the biggest one at the moment, and that is of course the new announcement of the PlayStation 5. A very sneaky, very intelligent announcement by Sony, and I'll explain a little bit of that in a short while. But we do know that the PlayStation 5 is coming. We know it's going to be alongside a new Xbox, currently supposedly codenamed Scarlet, and also Google Stadia, which is a new live streaming service from Google, and that's going to be an interesting road to say the least. But what exactly do we know about the PlayStation? Now, this was very intelligent by PlayStation and Sony, and the reason I say that is because commanding the conversation in platforms is really important. Now, if you're a big company, you want somebody to be talking about your product before a rival product, and the reason you want that before indication is so you can lead the conversation in certain directions.
And will continue to offer the best value on the market. I'm very proud to announce that PlayStation 4 will be available at $399.
And you may notice in this press release that Sony really tries to push a few things here and kind of make them quite pivotal. And more importantly, they're sort of using buzzwords that people will associate with their console. And then when Xbox come out with their thing, they'll have to look at those buzzwords and go, well, Sony has 8K or Sony has XYZ. And it's a very intelligent thing to do because you're immediately putting yourself at the top tier and waiting for a comparison elsewhere. And I think that's a really smart move on their behalf. But ultimately the console itself is actually pretty interesting too. Now, the PlayStation 5 features an AMD chipset, which we were anticipating down to the fact that AMD has struck a deal with these guys for quite a long time now, and AMD really does offer a good bang for buck performance. They always have been that kind of company, and their new Ryzen series, for those of you who aren't particularly tech savvy, is releasing soon and boasts incredibly good specifications for a CPU for the price that supposedly they will be at. Now, this is combined with AMD's new Navi GPU system. Now, we don't know whether or not the PlayStation 5 is going to feature an APU design where both the GPU and CPU are built into one place, or if it's going to be two separate entities. We'll probably find that out at a later date. But in terms of what statistics these guys are offering, it's something that I think is quite impressive. So to begin with, we do have the confirmation that this is running off of these new AMD chipsets. We expect those to be powerful, and more importantly, we expect them to sell for a really low price, but also give a lot of performance as well. Now, what's worth mentioning here is that AMD and PlayStation have done a very intelligent thing where PlayStation typically sell their consoles at a loss. So things like the PlayStation Pro and things like the PS4 were actually typically sold at a loss for the company, but are made up in terms of sales and licensing and what the individual user of that console will end up buying. And that means if they can get a lower price point, they're definitely going to be making gamers happy. I think a lot of people will think back about the Xbox One and PS4 and go, well, that was one reason PlayStation did very well. And that very much is true. Now, what else do we know about the PlayStation 5? Well, it supposedly will boast 8K support. Now, that won't be native. That doesn't mean this game's going to be playing at 8K, because that's more or less impossible with the current technology at the price point for a console. Now, you can play in 8K, but it would require godly power of like a $10,000, £10,000 PC, and that just simply isn't something that a console will have in its locker. But it will be able to probably do native 4K at around 60 FPS. Now, the reason I say this is because the current sort of chipset that we're looking at the moment, you would need a high-end graphics card and high-end CPU to do that on a basic PC. However, when you factor in the fact that PlayStation can get much more juice out of its consoles, down to the fact that it's not having to think about OS like Windows 10, and also down to the fact that ultimately they have a system in their hands that they are architecting for themselves, I think it's safe to say that native 4K 60 FPS is something that they're aiming for, even if it does lead to a higher price markup. And the reason I say that is because this 8K support will likely be through checkerboarding, a method that they showed in how they got 4K support for their PlayStation Pro. Now, although the PlayStation 4 Pro does not boast native 4K in some of its games, in the games where it does use checkerboarding, it's quite impressive, and I think we'll see an 8K kind of checkerboarding system going on. Now, moving on, we have something that I think is quite interesting, and this was about memory. Now, we're obviously talking about two different kinds of memory here, because you have RAM and of course you have actual storage memory. Now, we're expecting RAM to probably be in and around the 16 gig region, maybe 8, whatever works really. I'm sure they'll have something as a solution for that. But what's really important here is actually their storage system. Now, this was a key highlight in PlayStation's actual briefing, and it was to do with the running of the new Spider-Man game. Now, they had a PlayStation 4 Pro and they had a dev kit of the new PlayStation 5, so to speak, and effectively they decided to run a fast travel in Spider-Man, bouncing from one place on the map, loading into another. And it took 0.8 seconds on the PlayStation 5, which is about a 90% increase, which is completely insane and really impressive. And it likely points towards PlayStation using a PCIe 4 slot, which is actually really impressive. Now, they wouldn't confirm it themselves, but PCIe 4 is, for some of you who don't know, a very capable and very incredible form of memory that is supposedly capable of reading and transferring data at up to 64 gigabytes a second, which is obviously very quick and would read the entirety of game data, especially in terms of things like rendering worlds, things like fast traveling, things like load screens, things like loading into maps, significantly faster than anything else on the platform. And he did indeed confirm that this was a form of memory that isn't even available to PCs at the moment. So this is something that they are architecturing for the console themselves, which I think is a really interesting direction to take the PlayStation in. Now, we don't really know much else beyond that. We know that PlayStation 5 is going to be a pretty big powerhouse in terms of the kind of hardware that they're putting out. We know they're doing things like redesigning sound as well. That was something that came up. They basically want to beef up the console in every single way they can. They want to make it faster. They want to make it faster in terms of storage as well. They want to improve sound design. They want to improve more or less everything they possibly can. And what I found interesting was this quote by Mark Cerny that said effectively that the PlayStation 5 is just the vessel, and they wanted to give people an actual reason to go from the PS4 to the PS5, and that wasn't something as simple as just upping the graphics a bit, because effectively all you're doing then is just buying a PC upgrade, which you could do elsewhere with your own PC. Now, I'm pretty sure that PlayStation is aware of that, and I think they're trying to find ways to diversify and, more importantly, incentivize their platform, especially in this much more competitive market that they're coming up against. PlayStation undoubtedly are the victors of the last generation. They made a lot of money and sold a lot of consoles, and they completely destroyed more or less all other competition. But in order to deliver that again, they're going to need more reasons to do so, and they're going to need more reasons to point towards consumers and say, this is what we have that makes us special, beyond just things like first-party content. Because as you've seen, over across the pond, if we look at Xbox, we've seen lots of first-party developers being snatched up by them, and it's definitely looking like Xbox are trying to come out the door swinging with their new console. And it is rumoured as well that the Xbox Scarlett is in fact significantly more powerful than the PlayStation 5 as it presently stands. There isn't exact specifications on that, and I would take that with a pinch of salt, because this is going to be really interesting in terms of a technological point. As somebody who's interested in technology, seeing how these two consoles, especially when PlayStation is saying that they can support 8K, likely aiming for native 4K 60 FPS, alongside things like PCIe 4 potentially, could be beaten by another console. That sounds like something impressive, to say the least. Now, we also have things like Google Stadia coming into the fray as well, and it looks like there is a lot of competition in this bracket here, and I can really understand why PlayStation 5 potentially is really going to be trying to push new and different ways to play their games and improvements that make people actually want to buy their console. I think it's something that is just common sense, and I think it's something that we're going to see happen a lot here. And I think what is the best example of this is looking over the pond again at Xbox, because Xbox have been doing stuff like the Game Pass, they've been doing things like improving their online services, and ultimately at this point, from a consumer standpoint, as somebody who owns a PS4 Pro, If I could go back, I probably would get an Xbox One X because the Game Pass is a fantastic deal, and it gives you guys a lot of content and a lot of access for your money. And of course, this isn't a hashtag ad, this is just from a generic consumer standpoint. So what do I really think is going to happen in the next generation? Well, I think it's safe to say that if the Xbox and PlayStation are fighting over this power struggle, Google Stadia is really what makes this the interesting period for video games. And the reason I say that is because the PlayStation and the Xbox in themselves are only vessels for gaming. And I remember people saying, there was this quote along the lines of saying that Netflix's biggest competitor was video gaming and vice versa. Because when people settle down to play games, it's a part of their time that they're using. And likewise, a subscription service like Netflix or like Google Stadia is a service that you're paying for, but could take away your time. If Google Stadia goes ahead and says, okay, well, for £15 a month, we're going to give you this access to any video game we want, we'll stream it to your home and it will run really well, then a lot of people are going to look at these consoles and go, well, why am I paying for a box? Why am I paying £400, £500, £600 for this thing? And I'm sure Xbox and PlayStation are very much aware of that, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see what they do to try and counteract that. I'd say this is probably going to be the biggest period of console innovation we've seen for a while, and I'm not talking about the kind of gimmicky innovations like things like cameras and, the kind of crap we've seen before. I'm really thinking along the lines of them trying to re-engage their fans, see what's working, and see how they can offer them more. And I think you're going to see a lot of back and forth between these companies trying to one-up each other, because ultimately I don't think there's going to be a huge successor in this next generation. I think both of the companies will do well, I think both of them will make a lot of money, but with things like Google Stadia coming into the fray, although it might not be perfect at launch, Google Stadia, and although it might not necessarily represent a threat for people who do want a dedicated gaming system, it does introduce a new fold of understanding into the mantra here. It does mean that these companies are going to have to look at themselves and saying, well, if they're offering this, what do I offer? And if Xbox is offering this, what do I offer? And if it is the case that the so-called Project Scarlet is supposedly more powerful than the PS5, although the specs already are quite impressive, then PlayStation's going to have to look at themselves and saying, well, they have a more powerful console, it's likely they're going to be in a similar price bracket. What are we going to do that makes it different? What makes us unique? Is it the fast loading times? Is it the services we're offering? Is it a new take on the VR headset too? And more importantly, it's about gauging their communities and understanding what it is as a gamer we're looking for, what we want, what we are ultimately trying to receive here. Now, I'm interested to see in you guys' thoughts below. We do have a lot of rumors, and a lot of it is just a pinch of salt right now, but based on the information we have on the PlayStation 5, is this something you're interested in? Or are you bouncing towards other places? Or are you steadily fraying away from gaming and heading towards things like online services? Or are you heading towards things like PCs? Because of course those are still a pretty big thing, and they're also rapidly improving with things like the new Ryzen 3000 series coming out. Now for me, I really think that the next generation is about what these consoles and companies can offer to the consumer beyond just a box. Now, I think it's safe to say that the Xbox and the PlayStation will be perfectly capable of offering some form of 4K 60 FPS. They've been trying to do it now already with the PS4 Pro and the Xbox One X, but ultimately, with a new bump in power and some more design innovations, it seems achievable, pretty easily achievable for both of these companies. Now, with that in mind, well, what else can they do? We've reached the sort of gold standard of gaming, high frame rates at, of reasonably good graphics settings. Now, of course, it isn't the kind of native 4K kind of stuff we've seen on PC, although it could be in this generation. But it's good quality, and people will buy it and they will enjoy it. Now, PlayStation has slightly hinted towards supporting 8K, and maybe that's just future-proofing, but what features can they offer? I think Xbox is definitely going to have an edge coming out the doors here, and the reason I say that is because they've focused a lot on their infrastructure. Their backwards compatibility more or less works on all of their platforms now. You can go on your Xbox One X and you can play anything from original Xbox games to 360 to present, and I think that's definitely going to carry on with the next generation, but more importantly as well, I think they're definitely starting to look more towards the overarching picture here, because if I go to buy an Xbox One Game Pass, I'm getting tons of content at a pretty low cost, and I'm sure they're aware of that, and I'm sure PlayStation are aware of that, and I'm really interested to see what services are going to be introduced with these consoles to try and get people to come to them. Now let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Is this something you're interested in? Will you be buying a PlayStation 5 or a new Xbox? Or are you going to wait? Do you see any reason to give up your 4K PS4 Pro or your Xbox One X, even though they seem to be pretty powerful themselves? Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below, and let me know what you think of this new series. As always folks, it's been me, The Tactical Brit, and I'll catch you again in the next video.